enjoy the fact that it's almost always unanimous.
Yeah, me too. And I don't, I don't think that it represents a problem that we've done it for the last few meetings, but it sounds like to me that that's the appropriate way to go about it. And we can confirm that, but it sounds like it makes sense for right now to proceed with that in mind and have seven voting members of the Conservation Commission and one selectman's representative that is there to, express the views and serve as a liaison between the select board and the Conservation Commission, but not to be a voting member of the Conservation Commission.
Okay. I know that on the planning board, I am a full voting member. Mm-hmm. And the alternates, if there are not 7, including myself, then one of the alternates steps in as a voting member for that evening.
I see.
But I can't let you use our office anymore then. No.
Well, we can confirm, but that was Julie's message this morning. She sent an email, and I'll bring it up during the actual meeting just so everyone's aware.
Okay, I don't imagine it could ever be to come back at us because, like I said, we've never had. It's never been a 4-3 vote where my vote swung it one way or the other. So
right,
I think we're all right for the record. And tonight I'll sit tight if everybody shows up.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks, Dick.
Can I make a recommendation for a quick change in the agenda to put Jackson Falls in front of Prospect Farm so that Barbara can get in, do her presentation, and come back out?
Yes, that makes sense to me. All right, well, it's 7:02 and it looks like we have a quorum. I think there are a couple of phone numbers or a few phone numbers in the meeting that I guess I should go ahead and clarify who all of those are. So I can see Ken, Barb, Tom, Mike, Dick, Brian, William Abbott with the Land Trust, and then there are 3 phone numbers. Could 603-383-9054?
That's me. It's Pam.
Oh, hi, Pam.
Hi there. Thanks for sending the information, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. And just to clarify, you did send me 2 emails, right? Because the first
but the first one didn't show it had been sent. So that's why I better send another one.
Oh, I see. Okay. I just wanted to make sure because the first one came through and said, you've never received an email from this person before. Are you sure this isn't spam? And it checked out. So it looked.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And then so 206-491-6985.
That's me, Ben Halcyon.
Hi, Ben.
Hello.
And then 603-866-1104.
That's me. That's Hank.
Hi, Hank.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How about you?
Pretty good.
You'll be glad to know that I'm doing the meeting from my office tonight, which has pretty consistent internet, and hopefully will resolve some of the recording problems that you and Will have had to deal with. So hopefully we figured that out. I don't see Will on the call yet, but I suppose he doesn't have to be here, assuming that the recording does work.
Right. Yeah. As soon as I get it, I'll send him an email and everything. So.
Perfect. Okay. Sounds good. Well, let's go ahead and start with the review of the minutes. As I mentioned, there were recording issues with the last Zoom meeting because my internet was coming in and out during the meeting, and so it sounded like Will had some trouble compiling the minutes, and there were a couple of things that we should probably make sure to include. The first one I want to make note of is that Julie Hoyt with the town actually pointed out to me today that we've been operating with 8 Conservation Commission members, with Dick included as a voting member. She clarified that is not actually allowed. And so the max number of members on a conservation commission is 7, according to NH municipal law, I believe. And with that in mind, I just spoke to Dick, and he's all right with, at least for the time being, proceeding with that in mind and having just the 7 full-time members of the Conservation Commission vote, while Dick serves as the liaison, obviously, between the Select Board and the Conservation Commission. So that was one correction, I guess, to these minutes and past minutes, is that, fortunately, like Dick mentioned, we've voted unanimously on everything, and so hasn't been a problem, and I don't think would be a problem, but that's something that we should clarify and make sure to keep in mind. Any other changes to the minutes?
Jeff, I'll move to accept them with the change that you just offered.
So to correct or to clarify that Dick is not a full member of the Conservation Commission. I guess the other thing I think we should probably, I don't know, make a note that they might be segmented minutes, or they might not fully represent everything that happened at the meeting. I don't know whether we need to add that note, but it sounded like the video did come out for a good 20 minutes of our discussion. So
Actually, I think that correction would belong with tonight because we did not discuss it at the last meeting.
fair enough. All right. Well, I'll work with Will to make that. It sounds like, so Ken has made the motion, and I think I saw Tom raise his hand to second. Okay, great. I'll go through the roll call. Ken?
Yes.
Those in favor? Tom?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So it carries unanimously, and we can move on to tonight's agenda. I sent out an email outlining the fact that the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust will be joining us tonight to make a presentation, give us some updates on some of their projects, and present some information that I distributed to all the members of the Conservation Commission. Hopefully everyone got all of that and was able to review. But sounds like William also has a plan to present some of that information tonight. And so I think to provide as much time as William needs, I'll make it short and just say that we'll make this the first agenda item and give William the opportunity to present now. I can enable screen sharing. It doesn't look like we have anyone questionable on the call right now. So let me see. All right. William, are you able to share your screen now?
We will see. Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Hi, William.
Strange times we're living in. Let's see. So I think showing shared screen on my end, so I'm hoping that works for you all.
Yes.
I can see it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Jeff, and thanks to everybody for having me here as part of tonight's agenda. I know that we presented to the Conservation Commission more than a year ago about this project, and so I am here to mostly answer your questions and to provide you a status update with what we've been doing for the last year. And most all of it's good news. So, but just to recap, this is the project scope for what we are currently calling the Dundee Community Forest. I will also note that this right here is also known, it's property owned by the New England Forestry Foundation, also known as the Dundee Community Forest, which is confusing. So Dundee Community Forest is probably going to be the name we stick with, but it's also just a working name. So that's something to get back to you all with feedback about. But we're looking at all of the, excuse the background noise, we're looking at all of the tracts of land that were hobbled together by Mac Beal over the course of 4 decades, across 16 tracts or 16 parcels, I should say, in Bartlett as well as Jackson. So everything in bold orange outline is property that is in consideration for the purchase and long-time conservation as a new community forest. To separate out, for the project is being helped with funding through the Forest Legacy Project, the Forest Legacy Program. The Forest Legacy Program is administered through the Forest Service. So you'll see down here that we have our logos, the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust logo, the Forest Legacy logo, and then also the Trust for Public Land, which is a essential partner in helping us to get this all together. So the naming of the tracts here, the Bartlett Tract, the Thorn Mountain Tract, the Tin Mountain Tract, and the Doublehead Tract, those are naming conventions based on the Forest Legacy Program's definition of what a tract is. So, but all told, it's more than 1,000 acres of land across both Bartlett and Jackson. The Windy Hill property you'll see is highlighted in a salmon color. So that is owned separately from the orange tracts. The orange tracts are still owned by the Dundee Management Corporation. The Windy Hill property is privately owned by Ann Peterson, and she is generously agreeing to donate an easement that will serve as a non-cash match for us to pull down more federal funding. And I'll explain that in a minute. There are other tracts that are also, other parcels that are also in consideration for pulling down, for serving as match, easement match, and pulling down more federal funding. And then finally, the purple tracts up here by the East Pasture Trail are also owned by the Dundee Management Corporation, Mac Beals Holdings, but they are being sold directly to the U.S. Forest Service. And so they are not part of what we are now considering the Dundee Community Forest, but they will be conserved by their eventual sale to the Forest Service. So let's see. So I also provided in the materials a write-up, the one-pager, quote unquote. And this is it for the folks that are not visually or map oriented and would rather read text. This is the text. The Trust for Public Land did have Rick Vanderpool come out on site in the last year and do an ecological assessment of the property. And so a lot of the very honestly very brief snippeted details in the ecology section are coming from Rick Vanderpool's report. His overall report is, of course, many, many, many pages long with tons of maps. So I'm happy to provide that if anybody would be interested in that. And I also think that the other thing that the one-pager speaks about is reaching out to the community about what the recreational benefits might be. And I would say that we are still, I think that the pandemic has definitely thrown a spanner in the works with respect to us reaching out to our communities to find out exactly what they would like us to be doing with this land. I will say that our overarching philosophy here is by following the lead that was developed down in Conway in 2018, where the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust owns the Pine Hill Community Forest in fee, but we have a management committee that's comprised of selectmen from the town, Conservation Commission members from the town, school board members, Tin Mountain staff, the Mountain Meadow Riders Snowmobile Club, and also the Conway Rec Path. So we are still very much interested in creating an advisory committee with the town of Jackson representing, as well as the town of Bartlett representing certain interests. And that work has been delayed due to the pandemic, and also just because the overall funding picture for the community forest is about 6 months behind schedule. But it is all looking good. So the last piece that I that I emailed everybody is the budget, which is admittedly confusing. So I want to spend some time here just making sure that everybody understands the budget. So we'll begin up here with the expenses. So this whole block is obviously expenses, and then the block down below is anticipated income, either pledged or hopefully pledged in the future.
Can you put that up on the screen, please? Budget?
It is up on the screen.
I don't have it.
No, we're still seeing the one page.
Oh, darn it. You know what I did? I shared my screen with, do you know that there's two different screen sharing functions? You can either share your screen or you can share a window, and I shared just one window. So I'm going to share my screen. And so this is the one pager that was emailed to you by Jeff. This is what I was just talking about the recreational opportunities, the overview, the ecology statement. Some of this information right here in the ecology statement was developed by Rick Vanderpool, Dr. Rick Vanderpool. So moving on to the budget, everybody can see this now, right?
Yes, thanks.
Great. Okay, so this block right here is the expense line item, and this here is the anticipated revenue and grants line item. So we are, admittedly, this is still very much in flux. So take all the numbers here with a chunk of salt. The option agreement, the Trust for Public Land is the entity that has signed the option agreement with the Dundee Management Corp, not the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust. So the Trust for Public Land is teeing up the deal, negotiating with the extended Beal family, making sure that a lot of these grants are either, coming in the door full force, or again, teeing up some of the grants for Upper Saco Valley Land Trust to write. And then at the end of the day, the Trust for Public Land leaves. They're a national organization that does not want to own land in a local community for the long run. They might hold it temporarily, but their overall goal is to tee everything up and then leave. So the Trust for Public Land has led, again, with the negotiations with the Beal family, as well as several of the largest grants. The option agreement with the Beal family has a high fair market value scenario and a low fair market value scenario. We already have an appraisal in hand, but the option agreement is hinging on the final appraisal. Because there's federal money involved in this acquisition, we need to go through what's called a yellow book appraisal to federal standards. And it also has to be reviewed by the Forest Service staff and by their review appraisers. So the appraiser that is lined up is Peter Nault out of Southern New Hampshire, and his work will be vetted and reviewed by both Forest Service staff and then also shipped out to these review appraisers that make sure that we're paying attention to all the strange federal rules, like the whole parcel rule and a whole bunch of really, honestly, stuff that's beyond my pay grade and confusing. So suffice it to say that the review, the final appraisal and the review of that final appraisal has not been done yet and will likely not be done until next summer. So we are still working with an option agreement that has a lot of flexibility. So we have a high fair market value scenario and a low fair market value scenario. The numbers shown on this spreadsheet assume the high fair market value scenario, which I also think, knowing what's happening with real estate in the area, is a fair assumption these days. The price of the land is divided into two buckets. The first one is the value of the land as restricted fee land. So that's like inaccessible backland that can't be used for development. The property is very well stocked. It has not been with timber. It has not been actively harvested since the 60s. So the value shown for the restricted fee is high, but supported by the timber value on the property. The conservation easement value at 2.29 million is the value that is attributed to the development rights on the property. So the Trust for Public Land is going to enter into, they're going to be at the closing table along with the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust. The conservation easement that extinguishes these development rights will reduce the property value to the restricted fee. So right now, if we highlight both of these cells, the high fair market value scenario for the property is 3.528 million, which is high, but doable. And after the conservation easement is on the property and recorded, the value of the land will be reduced to only 1.238 million. Any questions so far? Okay, so
The buyer is going to be paid for the conservation easement value, is that correct? So it's actually
both.
seeing the combination of these two at 3.5.
Yeah, so the Dundee Management Corporation is owed the value of the land in its entirety at 3.5 million at the high fair market value scenario. We are coming to the table, the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust is coming to the table with at least 1.2 million to purchase the restricted fee and to cover all of the due diligence costs. So here's the rest of all these categories for the due diligence costs. And the survey is a shocker at $215,000 for the survey. I will say that's by far the most that we've ever paid for a survey, but the Trust for Public Land, again, is leading on getting the survey out to bid. We've received 3 bids so far, all of which are in that ballpark. It's because there are 16 separate tracts that were purchased over a long period of time. Many of those tracts have squirrely title. A lot of those tracts were sold on a handshake. And I would say that, you know, the chickens are coming home to roost right now. So we have a lot of title issues and a lot of poorly marked boundary lines to cover across 16 different parcels. So it's just frankly an expensive survey. And this is something we've gone back and forth about a lot, but it seems to me that that there is not a local survey firm or even a regional survey firm that is willing to tackle this project for much less than what is shown there. The other large cost here is the project management cost. And I will say, if you look at this 278,000 and you look down here to the Trust for Public Lands contribution of 267,000 on the income side, most of the project management costs are TPL costs, and they have at this point agreed to foot the bill for most of their own project staffing, which is great. There are other project costs in here like community engagement, having community listening sessions that haven't yet happened. The fundraising is, we did hire a fundraiser for a period of time right before the pandemic, and we are likely to hire a fundraiser, a consulting fundraiser again when we enter the public phase of fundraising for this campaign. And then also this $110,000 is the initial, it's our stewardship endowment and our initial site improvements. So for every single property that the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust takes on, we like to have money squirreled away in the bank, treated as a quasi-endowment, so that the money that we spend on any given year on monitoring the property, perambulating it, looking at all the boundary lines, making sure that there's no timber trespass issues, cleaning up trash, doing trail work, all of that work needs to be coming out of the interest earned on the endowment account. So 110,000 is not the amount of money that we are going to be spending. It's the interest off of that $110,000 that we would be spending on a year-to-year basis. So we're looking at a total project expense of $4,284,000. Forest Legacy is coming in at close to 100% of likelihood of funding. And this 2.29 million, you'll see magically matches this number up here, the value of the development rights or the value of the conservation easement. Forest Legacy we ranked 12th nationwide. The application was submitted last year, and we are, Forest Legacy funds their projects by starting at project number 1 and then going down the list to project number 50 or whatever, and then they run out of money, and then the projects below that don't get funded. By scoring 12th nationwide, we are in a really good position of getting our full 2.29 million. We are about $35 million down the line, so the projects above us, projects 1 through 11, cumulatively will cost the United States taxpayers $37 million. But there's going to be at least 64 million obligated into that fund. With the passage of the Great American Outdoors Act, which is supposed to secure permanent funding of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, those dollars amounts should actually be doubled. So there should be $120 million in the Forest Legacy pot. And again, we're only $37 million down the line. So we would have to have Congress, frankly, do something illegal based on what just got passed with the Great American Outdoors Act in order not to receive this funding. So I have it earmarked at a likelihood of funding of 100%. As soon as Congress passes a budget for fiscal year 2021, we are likely to receive an obligation of this funding. We also heard last week that our LCHIP application for $500,000 was awarded. So that money is now money in the door, which is great. Moose Plate, the Moose Plate grant maximum is $24,000. We're going to apply to that this coming September. There's also the possibility of getting some money from the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund. That's a relatively new fund funded at the state level, and they are still working on the rules for what kinds of properties they fund. But basically, a section of what's this development down here called? With there's like Italian and German names, the lower section of Dundee Road down here. Anyway,
Villaggio.
Villaggio Bianco, something like that. The wellhead protection area for their public water supply goes on to the property right here. So because of that, this tract, the Bartlett tract, actually qualifies for funding from the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund, which is exciting. But that's, again, something that we will apply for funding for next year in 2021. Let's see. The big one here is USVLT capital campaign. We are at the same time as doing this community forest, we're expanding the Pine Hill Community Forest in Conway. We're also raising money for a capital reserve fund to fuel our strategic work for the next 20 years. And we're also trying to raise money for future agricultural easements. So in addition to this project, we have a lot of other irons in the fire, and we are collectively trying to raise a lot of money to support all of those projects. Out of that capital campaign, we're expecting about $1 million to be contributed directly to this project. So that's where that number comes from. And I'm here tonight to provide you with an update, but also to show you that you are highlighted in yellow on this budget at $25,000. And I know that your land use change tax fund is not as robust, say, as Conway's, but it is more robust than Bartlett's. And it's really important to show local municipal support for projects like this. It increases our chances of receiving other funding either at the state or federal level. So I don't know what the process is for officially asking for those dollars from the Jackson Conservation Commission. We would love to get $25,000 from the land use change tax fund. We would love to get $52,000 from the land use change tax fund. We would love to get anything that you would like to allocate towards this project. My request might be as simple as presenting to you tonight, but if you need me to come back at the next Conservation Commission meeting or fill out paperwork, of course, I'm happy to do that. Let's see. Does anybody have any questions so far? I have a couple.
Will, I do. The first question I would ask is, does the town end up with any actual ownership of this property, or is it owned in fee by Upper Saco and the easement is held by the state?
It's held. It would be held in fee by the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust, with the easement held by the state of New Hampshire.
Okay.
The term community forest is important here because community forests typically mean municipal ownership. We were, by doing the Pine Hill Community Forest in Conway in 2018, we were going out on a limb because Conway already had a town forest, several different tracts that are considered town forest. And by involving the municipality in the advisory committee at both the school board level, the Conservation Commission level, and the select board level, we were able to comply with the understanding of what a community forest is writ large. So at that time, the Open Space Institute, which is a land trust out in New York City, had a lot of funding dedicated towards community forests. And we worked with the Open Space Institute on developing the MOU that we have with the town of Conway. It was that model that then excited the Trust for Public Land for this project because it crosses the town line. So because it involves both Bartlett and Jackson, I think the Trust for Public Land looked at the model that we had developed in Conway and said, this is a really great model for involving municipal ownership, a sense of municipal belonging, but without having the two towns try to figure out who's going to own what.
Yeah, my second question would be is, what proportion of this property is in Bartlett? It looks like
I don't have the statistic ready off the top of my head for you, Ken, but
yeah.
the largest tract by acreage is the Bergendal tract in Bartlett, which is this piece.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's probably like 45, 55, with 55% being in Jackson, but that's a ballpark.
Yeah. Because it would seem to me that if Jackson was going to put money in, and there is a problem, I'm gonna bring it up in a second, but if Jackson was to put money in, and a good proportion of this is in Bartlett, I would think that many of the residents of Jackson would also want to see some skin in the game from Bartlett.
That's understood. The last time I checked in with the Bartlett Conservation Commission, they were still not collecting land use change tax funds and allocating them to use by the Conservation Commission.
Well, let me describe the problem, because I went back and took a look at when current use is voted in by a town, it only permits the Conservation Commission to use it to purchase lands that is going to be owned either in easement or fee by the town, unless the town takes a second vote that allows it to pass money on to an NGO where the town does not have ownership in the property. That vote has never occurred in the town of Jackson. So currently, the Jackson Conservation Commission, I don't believe, can actually take the money out of its current use unless it brought it to the town for a vote. Actually, if you go through and read the state's current use in the handbooks, it's pretty clear in there.
That's I just want to real quick jump in, because that is my understanding as well. Ken did a fair amount of research and sent around some materials to document that, and it looks like the process that would have to happen would be that first, we as the Conservation Commission would have to decide if this is a worthwhile thing to take up and push forward. And then we would have to submit a town warrant article that basically outlines that the Conservation Commission has the authority to expend funds from the Conservation Fund to a qualified organization for the purposes of some conservation effort. Obviously, the Land Trust would be one of those qualified organizations. So if and when that warrant article were to pass, then the Conservation Commission would have to have a public hearing. And then the Conservation Commission would have to take a majority or have a majority vote to approve expenditures of that fund. The one thing that I did note in my reading was that it doesn't look like that. Typically, it sounds like that authorization for the Conservation Commission to expend those funds in that manner is taken as a one-time vote, and then into the future, the Conservation Commission has that authority. So if there is by chance, if at some point there already was a vote to give the Conservation Commission that authority, we may still have it. It doesn't look like that's the case, but that could be if we were to review the historical records a little bit more.
Yeah, I went through the records because the current use came in 2006, and I did thumb through all of the town votes since then, and I can't find that the town ever voted it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. So the other thing that I think is important.
I could be wrong, but that's my quick survey was the town never voted after the 2006 for that second part, which is called the optional use.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I think is worth noting is that authorization doesn't have to be permanent. It could be voted in and then rescinded thereafter or shortly thereafter by the select board, in meaning that it could be voted in for the purposes of one project or one specific expenditure. And so I just think it's worth making that clear. And then the other piece of background information that I did want to provide so that it's on the record and in public is that the Conservation Fund, and I'm sure everyone on the Conservation Commission is familiar with how the process works, but Conservation Fund receives 50% of the land use change tax in Jackson. And the Conservation Commission does have the opportunity and authority to make discretional expenditures from that at a smaller level than the one that we're currently talking about. But there's basically, that I can see, there hasn't been a historical precedent for making these kind of large expenditures from the account. Over the last several years, it's fluctuated, in the magnitude of $500 to $1,000 several times. And then there was one contribution back in 2017 that brought the fund up from about 20,000 to where it currently sits at around 57,000, I believe, in that account. So that's kind of what the last few years have looked like for the account. But I think it is also interesting to note that through one land use change tax contribution, it went from $20,000 to $50,000, $55,000, somewhere in that range. And so it could quickly go back up to a similar level at some point in the future.
That would actually require somebody coming in with a major development on a major parcel.
Which is not ideal. Agreed.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you all. What have the expenditures been from the land use change tax fund?
Those that I saw were small things like wetland delineations and wetland reports. I believe the Jackson Falls wetland report maybe was on there. I think some of the mowing that's occurred at Prospect Farm has historically come from that account from time to time.
Actually, I think that's come from the Baker Fund.
Okay.
So, and Jeff, you said that there was some threshold at which you did not need to go to the taxpayers to spend money out of the fund. What is that threshold?
That's a good question. I don't know what the exact delineator is, but within that document that Ken sent out, which kind of outlines the authorities granted to a Conservation Commission relevant to the Conservation Fund, there is some amount of discretion that the Conservation Commission has on its own that I think then maybe requires kind of just a rubber stamp approval from the select board. but that doesn't require a town warrant.
But it does require, I believe, a nexus to land that is owned by the town. So like when we did Jackson Falls and so forth, this was town-owned property. And the dilemma, and Will, you can look this up, but the optional, which is when you're starting to move money to an outside entity where the town has no actual legal fee interest in the property in some shape or form, the money can't come out of this to that unless the town votes to give the Conservation Commission that permission.
Yeah, and I guess I'm on many listservs across the state, and I've seen other projects where allocations from certain town funds, well, a town can't also disband, sell off any land without a vote of the public. So anyway, I've seen similar situations that needed to go up as a warrant article before all the voters of the town. I think I'm just taken aback because, well, first we've done these types of transactions many times in Conway, and I was assuming that perhaps the town of Conway took a vote way back when to allow disbursements from the land use change tax fund. They also have a separate LCHIP match fund. And then secondly, we've had these conversations before with the Jackson Conservation Commission, whether it's a helping with the stewardship endowment for Hayes Farm up at the top of Iron Mountain Road. We've definitely had these conversations about allocations from the land use change tax fund, although those conversations have not gone anywhere to my knowledge. There has been no disbursement to USVLT for our various projects. So
this is state RSA.
Well, yeah, understood. I mean, if it's a speed bump we need to get over, we need to get over it. It's simply surprising to me, and I'm sorry I didn't know about it before tonight.
Yeah. And I can send you that information if you want it. But when I was going through, I think this second challenge that we have as a committee, or at least let me speak from my own perspective, the town owns Prospect Farm, and it is abutted by the White Mountain National Forest with the exception of 2 other landowners. And Prospect Farm is a highly used recreational area, both in the summer and the winter. And there is an in-holding there that has been problematic for the town several times in the past. And we're in the process of developing a general management plan for Prospect Farm. And one of the things that may or may not come out of that general management plan is to try to come to some resolution with these abutting landowners on several issues. And that would probably, at least in my perspective, would probably be the highest priority for this parcel, simply because this is a parcel that is owned by the town that has had some issues because of the abutting landowners.
So I wouldn't be doing my job if I weren't advocating for the project in front of us right now.
And I want to be clear, I think this project is an excellent project, but unfortunately, we do have this RSA in front of us, and we also have been looking at using that fund potentially after we come out with a general management plan to see whether we could resolve some of those issues. Because
okay, well, we are looking for all of 2021 to have the rest of the funding for this project come in the door. Several of the grants that we'd be applying for, like Moose Plate, won't even be dispersed into our bank account until the fall of 2021. The option agreement with the Beal family goes all the way through to the end of 2021. So we have time on our sides, which is really great. If we need to get this on a warrant article in front of the Jackson taxpayers next spring, I would love that. I think that would be music to my ears, and I'd be happy to make additional presentations to support this project. I also just want to advocate for this project because it's really looking like it will happen. The 2.29 million coming from Forest Legacy is nearly assured. The 500,000 from LCHIP is assured. We have an option agreement with the owners. The rest of the private philanthropy is falling into place. And I would hate for money not to be spent on a project that's right in front of us in exchange for a future hope for something that's hypothetical at this point and that may never come to fruition. So I will say that a good friend of mine says that grant money is there to be spent, and it's not doing anybody any favors by sitting in a bank account and accruing interest. If we have a really great project in front of us, I would suggest that you all look favorably upon spending it now, instead of waiting for the next project, which may never come up.
I think we, again, I'll speak for myself, but I think we need to do our due diligence with these other landowners first, just simply because of the issues that are involved, which have been very serious, almost went to the Superior Court at one time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
Okay, could I ask a question as Dick Bennett? Are you done, Ken?
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I was going to add is the
Okay,
second
go ahead.
option is to just put a warrant article up for the town to make a contribution that would be outside of this current use fund.
That's a great suggestion. I take either or both.
Right,
go ahead, Dick.
thank you. Would you just give us a brief scenario of what the property tax, burden would be, or who it would go to, and how it works?
Yeah, so we, the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust either pays taxes on all of the land that it owns, or we pay a payment in lieu of taxes that is equivalent to the current use rate. So in the town of Conway, for example, we have a pilot agreement, payment in lieu of taxes agreement with the town of Conway, and we pay a property tax rate equivalent to current use. In the other towns where we work and in Maine, we do not have a pilot agreement set up, and so we pay our fair share. We pay our taxes. In Maine, it's the tree growth rate. The only reason why, for the town of Conway, the only reason why we have a pilot agreement is because we don't want our fee-owned land to, let's say, the world collapses around us. The Upper Saco Valley Land Trust can't pay its bills, and for some, this is years in the future, but God forbid that the land gets taken for non-payment of back taxes. And we don't want conservation land to ever be subject to being sold to non-conservation uses because of a lack of payment of taxes. So in Conway, we worked out a pilot agreement that says that we support the municipal infrastructure of the town. We want to be good citizens. We want to contribute. But on a technical merit, we don't want our payment to be considered a tax so that we can never be dinged for the non-payment of back taxes. The other towns, we have not been frankly, we don't own as much land in other towns, so we haven't been in front of the select boards to make that determination in the other towns.
And I believe in Jackson, actually, the Jackson Ski Touring Foundation, which is also a 501c nonprofit, does pay a payment in lieu of taxes on the property that it does own.
So we actually wrote a letter about 6 years ago, and we were rejected. So Ken, I would love to talk to you offline about how you went through that process and how
I don't know how it went through, but I know that the Ski Touring Foundation does pay, and I wouldn't be surprised if they just decided to just pay it. There was never an agreement or anything.
That's frankly what we decided is, we're not going to fight this if the towns don't agree with our position, that it's too expensive and too much time, too much staff time to fight it. So we would rather just pay the taxes then have an official pilot agreement.
And I would assume that this property is currently in current use.
Yes, it is.
So if that's the case, then the answer to Dick's question, the tax revenue would stay the same on this property.
Correct.
Mike, Brian, Pam, Ben, Tom, any comments or questions from the larger committee?
I had one quick kind of meaningless question, and that was just, I thought that the Moose Plate program was part of LCHIP, but you have it broken out as two different things. Is it a separate?
Yeah, there's actually several funds that all fall within the Moose Plate grants, and so LCHIP, there's the State Conservation Committee grant is the one that's capped at 24,000, and that is the smallest of the Moose Plate grants. And so anyway, they are two different grants, two different review processes. Typically, if you get a large LCHIP grant, Moose Plate gets, it's like a kicker that gets added on. So you do technically have to apply, but our chances of getting $24,000 from Moose Plate is very, very good because we got the 500 from LCHIP.
Brian, Tom, Pam, Ben?
No, I had a question just regarding like recreational development.
Yep.
And just maybe just a summary of what that might have looked like.
Well, that's where you all come in. So the community outreach has really not happened yet because we just have been hearing about our success with these grants. And so we weren't going to invest the staff time and the money into doing the public and community outreach until we were pretty much assured that this was going to happen. We feel confident now that we're in a place to start doing those community listening sessions, although it's going to be very challenging still with the pandemic.
Right.
I'll highlight a couple of things here. So, I'm not sharing my screen. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen if that's okay. So the Mountain Tract right here is in the running for an aquatic resource mitigation grant from the state. That's going to be $74,000. That's specific to wetland function and riparian ecosystems. We chose the Tin Mountain Tract because it has the most amount of second and third order streams, which are really good candidates for improving brook trout habitat and things like that. So this area is probably not going to be developed for recreation at the same level as, well, there's going to be additional strings attached in the easement held by the state of New Hampshire that would limit what we, the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust, as the landowner could or couldn't do with it. So there might be a hiking trail, but that might be it. Down here in the Bartlett Tract, there's better opportunities. There's more road frontage that's less tricky road frontage. There's better locations for trailheads, and frankly, shorter hikes to get up to pretty awesome views looking south down the valley from some of the ledges here. And then up at Doublehead, of course, you can't really have a conversation about what the Doublehead Tract is going to be without looking at the fact that the Doublehead ski trails are right here and what a potential realignment might look like. It might be a new ski trail, it might be a realignment of an existing ski trail, but I would say that any conversations about this is really getting ahead of ourselves, because the key part is to talk to the taxpayers and the stakeholders in these two towns about what they would like to see done on their land. So that's the whole idea. Is for the Pine Hill Community Forest in Conway, we did the same thing. A lot of the trail plan was worked on in concert with the advisory committee and also with input from community listening session where all the citizens were invited. So,
Will, could you help me out? Just to trying to understand the Doublehead Tract it shows, well, between the Doublehead Track and the National Forest is the leader's property,
Correct.
if I understand it correctly. But it is showing major frontage on Dundee Road, and most of that stretch has already got development on it. I'm a little confused as to whether that actually has access onto Dundee Road.
Yeah.
It does. So
Across from Sally's.
it doesn't really work when you zoom in this far.
Yeah.
Anyway, this blue line is a brook. This is Dearborn Field. The Dundee Management Company, two of the brothers own Dearborn Field separately, right here.
But that's
And
part
then
of the.
there's Leslie Fletcher and Larry Bama's house is right here.
Okay.
And then the Weeder Hanlon driveway is right here. So the property's on both sides of their driveway. There are like 3 or 4 houses tucked in here, I think. Maybe not that many. I don't really remember.
No.
So the Weeders have a right of way across this property then? For the-
Correct. Yep, they have an affirmative right of way across.
And
the
then you're
property.
saying as you come up Dundee Road, the field that's just above that first house on the knoll is part of this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Not to get down in the weeds too much, but that is, I believe that the Beal family will be retaining a portion of that field, whereas another portion of the field will be coming to us. So there's a subdivision of that field that has yet to happen
Okay.
as part of the project.
Because that has much to do with whether there's recreational potential moving up on this toward Ann Peterson's property or not.
Correct.
Yeah.
There is this brook right at the back of the field. There's a significant brook. And so anything crossing the brook would be a major expense. So it's kind of like a plan B option, to be honest. I think we're going to try to use the existing new parking area on the National Forest to the extent that we could. And, we, you know.
That is full almost all the time now. Yeah.
Yep. I see a lot more conversations being had to discuss the future of these parcels.
Yeah, and I think we should note that it's almost 8. And so given that it's become somewhat clear that this is probably a longer set of conversations leading up to, if we were to make the decision to move forward with it, a warrant article in March, I think we should continue to discuss it over the next couple or few meetings. The one thing that I do think is worth noting, and I obviously want to give anyone who hasn't spoken the chance to if they have any important points they want to make, but the one thing I do think is worth noting is that in some ways I see it as being better that it would require a town warrant article, in that would, if it passed, of course, and if we got to that point, would obviously demonstrate broad town support for the project and for that expenditure. So I see that as a bit of a positive, even though it's not as convenient as going straight through the Conservation Commission. So any other kind of last points or questions that people want to make before we move on? Only because, like I said, it is just about 8.
It will.
Yep.
Would it be possible to get that info that Dr. Vanderpool
Sure. Yep.
created for that property?
Yeah, I want to know where the old growth is.
It's basically the Rocky Ridge outcropping that runs along the whole spine. You know, it's basically where the loggers never went. So.
Do you mind taking 10 seconds? And you mentioned that there might be some potential other matching easements. What other easements would there be included?
Yeah, so the Forest Legacy program, it's a weird little rule of the Forest Legacy program, but they will support 75% of the value of all easements within the project area. So they come to the table with 75% of the value of the Dundee Management Corporation easement, but also the value of the Windy Hill easement. And so we have to, so if you take 2.29 million and you multiply it by 75%. It's and then subtract 2.29 from that. We have to come up with $572,000 of easement value in order to pull down the full 2.29 million. If you're lost, don't worry, it's really complicated. But so we're on the hunt for $575,000 of easement value. There are 3 potential easements that are now lined up that span from Jackson all the way down to Eaton. And so the project area, because this is a federal program, the project area is really broad. So we're in active conversations with 2 other landowners about whether or not they'd be interested in donating conservation easements that would serve as match, and those conversations are going pretty well. So,
Cool.
So if the town decided to put Prospect Farm in a conservation easement, and I know that they've looked at this in the past, and the decision has not been to do it, but if the town reversed itself and put Prospect Farm in a conservation easement, would that count as a match?
it's coming from a municipality, so I don't know. It might. I think the trick there is that the value has to be determined through an independent appraisal process.
Mhm.
So the appraisers are getting wealthy on this project. The more donated easements we line up, the more the appraisers are busy scrambling around coming up with valuations. I know that Prospect Farm has some deed restrictions on how it was gifted to the town in the first place. Those deed restrictions might gut whatever development values might be available on the property. So you're looking at, the simple way of thinking about it is like, how many house lots could be developed on that property? And by putting it in easement, how many house lots get erased? And you add up the value of those house lots. That's, the simplistic way of thinking about this.
Well, let me ask the question a little differently then. I'm just exploring options, but if the town came up with an agreement with one of the abutting landowners to put that land into town protection, would that count?
To put that land into town protection,
Town ownership.
there would still need to be a conservation easement given to the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust for it to count.
So what you need to have a count would have to be an easement that comes to Upper Saco Valley then?
Yeah.
That's helpful to know.
William, just to be clear, are you still looking for match properties, or have you secured those match properties that you need for this project?
They're all in various stages of coming in. So I would say at this point, the more options, the better. There are 3 really strong candidates, but who knows? Maybe there's going to be a title issue and one of them is going to fall out of candidacy late in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But if we could work out a conservation easement that went to Upper Saco Valley on some of these properties that abut Prospect, then that would qualify in this project area.
If it has frontage on a town-maintained road and has a high development value, if the appraiser determines that the highest and best use of that land is as a woodlot, then there really isn't much value there.
Well, the appraised value right now on one of those properties is probably about 70,000, but it
Are you
is.
talking about assessed or appraised?
It's what it's tax assessed at.
Right. And so an appraiser would come in and look at the highest and best use. And that's the first decision in the decision matrix. And if the highest and best use is as single family residential development, we're in business. If the highest and best use is as it is as a woodlot, then we're not in business. There would be no money involved.
One of the abutters would have access via Class 6 road. The other one does not have access even via Class 6 road, only has legal access relative to logging rights, is our understanding.
What I do is I hire appraisers to let me know what the values are. I don't try to guess, but based on what you're saying, Ken, it sounds like there's not that much money tied into those development rights.
I have a suggestion that maybe would help. This this conversation is obviously important and needs to happen. Probably would take up even the next meeting that we talked about it in. So I'm wondering if it would make sense to designate a Dundee discussion subcommittee consisting of a couple members of the commission to continue conversations with William and the town and whoever else about this particular decision, so that we can continue those conversations, but also so that we can continue on to other agenda items that we need to get to tonight. Does that?
I would be interested in doing that.
Jeff, I'd be willing as well.
Okay, great. Now, can someone remind me if there is a subcommittee formed with a certain number of members of the commission, at what point it becomes necessary to provide public notice for that meeting?
Over 3, I think.
Over 3. Okay, so 4. So I would also be interested in participating in that subcommittee, which would bring us to 3. I would back out if there was someone that was interested as well.
I'm also interested, but I could also back out. So
Mike,
I feel like-
that would be more than fine with me if you're interested.
unless Tom, you also looked interested.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I am interested, but we can flip a coin between the 3 of us.
Yeah, I'll talk to Tom about it.
You can.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about I'll make a motion to create a subcommittee to continue conversations about the Dundee project, consisting of Ken, Ben, and a 3rd member to be determined at a later date.
Second.
Second from Ben. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, Ken,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Pam,
Yes.
Ben,
Aye.
and I'm a yes. So we will, William, does that sound good to you? Does that make sense? Maybe I should have asked beforehand, but here we
No,
are.
that's great. The other party that is not here is JT Horn with the Trust for Public Land. So, you may be talking with both of us and also with my staff member, Abby King. But I like the direction that this is going in.
That sounds great. Well, thanks, William. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, I'm personally really excited about the project and its potential, and I think everyone here is. And so thanks for coming and presenting,
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Will.
William.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, as Ken mentioned before the meeting, I think we made the decision to move Jackson Falls subcommittee update to above Prospect Farm so that Barb could make a quick presentation update on the discussions that committee has been having over the last couple weeks.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm really excited about this. We have finalized a letter and a survey that are going out to the whole voting list in Jackson. And it is in process of being done as a bulk mailing, and it's going out the day after tomorrow. We did not want to get the survey out there to clog boxes any more than they were. And I will be back to you with an update once we start getting results in. But I am just so excited about the members of your committee that are on board with us. And I think that you'll be pretty amazed by the look of the envelope that people will receive. It's not just a piece of paper clipped together. They're getting a real mailing, and it's going to be great. So thank you so much. And I'm so glad that I got to hear about all this other stuff you guys are doing. This is amazing. But from Save Jackson Falls Committee, thank you very much. Thank you for giving me a minute. And we'll be back to you really soon because we have a deadline on all of the returns that are coming in. So thank you.
Thanks, Barb. Appreciate it. And sorry, I haven't been able to make it to a meeting personally yet, but I will keep trying.
But Jeff, I love seeing your little face on this little screen.
Any other updates for Jackson Falls? Mike, any, I know you had sent out an email about the signage and looking for a map. Were you able to make any progress with that?
Yeah, I contacted Larry Garland, photographer for the AMC, to see if he would be willing to help us out on that. And he said that he would be willing to do that. And so I've been kind of just emailing back and forth with him. I'm hoping to set up a time that we can just walk over to the falls and take a look and kind of give him an idea. He also offered to help with some of the interpretive aspects of the sign as well, the design and things like that. So we're just gonna, we'll chat about it. But we haven't nailed down a time yet. He's a pretty busy man. So, but I have not asked him. I assume that he's willing to volunteer his time, because he's very generous with that. I have not mentioned whether or not we would hire him. At some point when I talk to him in person, I'd like to get to that point. But my thought process right now is that he's going to volunteer to do this.
Great. Well, yeah, keep us posted. Thanks for moving that forward.
Yeah, and we can talk more about it when he comes up with some mock-ups. But everyone knows the AMC maps. I really like them. They're very clean, easy to read. There's not a ton of stuff on them. I think they're well done. So I think that they'd look good.
Awesome. Any other notes for Jackson Falls at the moment? Okay. Let's move on to Prospect Farm. I think the main thing that we have to discuss there is the questionnaire that Ken sent out. Ken had a couple of questions that he outlined for a discussion around that subject. The goal, and Ken, you can explain further, but my understanding is to send that out for input from the public, similar to what the Jackson Falls Committee is doing with their survey, but to get feedback on the general management plan draft that you've created, or I guess the idea to create a general management plan, and people's thoughts on what they want to see in that.
I think at the last meeting, it was recommended in the early phase to start soliciting public input. So everybody has received that. There's a couple questions that I had sent out, and I just want to go through those. The first one is just, when is it most effective to send it out? Obviously, folks are going to get the Jackson Falls one, and they will be dealing with that pretty much through Thanksgiving. And I would not recommend overlapping this with the Jackson Falls. I think it's good to have a little bit of space before this one comes in. The second question is on the Jackson Falls. That subcommittee made a decision to just send it to residents. So they're not using it through Jackson E-News. They did have to go back to the town to get monies for the postage and so on and so forth to be able to send the questionnaire out. If you send it out on something like Jackson E-News, then it's going to residents, it's going to non-resident taxpayers, and it could be going to interested folks as well. So the question is, what do we want for feedback? Is it from just residents? Do we want feedback from non-residents who are taxpayers? Or do we think it would also be valuable to potentially get a little bit of feedback? Though I don't think we would get a lot of responses from folks that don't hit those two categories, because I suspect that the majority of the folks who are signed into Jackson E-News are probably either taxpayers or residents, though I would not be surprised that you do have a small subset as well. So those are the sort of two mechanical questions. And then the third one is, I have put together, and I did run it by Mike and Brian, is, there is a cover letter that would explain what this is all about. And then the second component would be, are these the right questions? Understanding at this point, we're not really asking people for all their management decisions. We're just trying to collect information about users and what their user interests are. And I would see that later on, as we start to develop the general management plan, then we would be going back and soliciting from them some suggestions. But I think it would be better to do that after we've compiled what the existing ordinances are and so forth, so that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel at the same time with the public, which may not be fully aware of some of those existing conditions that already exist for Prospect Farm. So I'm looking for input on all three of those.
I'll start out of order with number 2, and that's I'd like to see it go to as many user groups as possible. I think I was thinking about it today, and I have friends that live in Maine, they live in Western Maine, live in Freiburg, and have spent more volunteer hours at up at Prospect Farm and ski more at Prospect Farm than a lot of people in town. And I feel like there are people that live in Glen that have very vested interests, that love the land, that are up there all the time. And it seems to me like we would be doing a disservice if we kept this to just Jackson residents. I kind of feel like it's a pretty arbitrary line between Bartlett and Jackson. And I'd like to see those people have some sort of say at some point as to a spot that they might really love.
Yeah, I agree with the broad mailing. However we get to it, as long as we're getting some input from both categories of taxpayers and voters and others.
Yeah, I think that could be helpful, given that there's been a conversation over the last year or so about kind of the intention of Prospect Farm and who is supposed to use it and who does use it. It'd be helpful to see, to inform that conversation with, who does use it and what do they do up there? How do they contribute to that area? And use that to inform the management plan as well. So I agree.
And are we comfortable with Jackson E-News being the mechanism to spread it? It's the simplest, least expensive. And the way that SurveyMonkey, I've never actually set one up before, but I did go and sort of check out their guidelines. You can have up to 10 questions, and you can get access up to 40 responses. And then after 40, we would have to buy a 1-month subscription for $100 to access 41 response on from that point on. So potentially this would cost roughly $100 if we got more than 40 responses.
I don't know whether there's a payment threshold for this, but I have used Google Forms in the past, which is very similar. It does a really nice job actually just taking the answers from the survey and populating a spreadsheet so that you can, make spreadsheets and charts and things like that.
I believe SurveyMonkey does the same thing. You can get basic stats from it, but is Google Forms basically like SurveyMonkey?
I think in many ways, I guess I don't know if there are particular things that SurveyMonkey has that Google Forms doesn't, but I've used it for similar purposes and it's worked really well and I've never had to pay for it.
I can follow up with you on that then.
I think they're basically the same thing. I know that we've used them before. I think they're essentially, they might interface slightly different, but I think they're essentially the same.
The other thing I was wondering is, would it make any sense to work with Jackson Ski Touring and have Jackson Ski Touring send out an email newsletter or something like that with this information? That would obviously be going to potentially a much bigger pool, but sounds like that might be what we want.
Yeah, I know the Jackson Ski Touring Foundation, has a email list of people who want to get, daily reports back, and I could check with Ellen, and I would be surprised if she has an issue with that. So the two venues we would use would be Jackson Ski Touring Foundation plus Jackson E-News.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see the split of how divergent the seasonal use is by far. And I always suspect, but don't know, that most people that go up there in the winter probably don't know and don't care who owns the land under the snow that they're skiing on. So it'd be interesting to kind of get at that. I like the questions too. I kind of wonder if we should have one that attempts to get at the question of, do people recognize the difference between the town's 500 acres and the national forest? And I'm not, kind of get a baseline understanding there too of what is the town's and what is not, and getting at that question or point that we all see that the town's land is the linchpin to access up there, and just to see if people know the question.
Yeah, that's in the cover letter, but Tom, I think that is an excellent question. And I mean, that just brings it up to question 9. Obviously, we don't want 20 or 30 questions because then you tend to get a pretty poor response. But I think adding that question would be both appropriate and pretty simple.
Yeah, I like your cover letter very much. It's good information. I somewhat wonder how many people would just skip to the questions, but I guess that's what we could quiz them and see if they've read the cover letter or not.
Yeah, and I, hopefully what we can also do, because the Julies have now updated both the Prospect Farm map and the most recent forest stewardship management up there, but in the cover letter there, we would provide the link so that they could go look at the map. Which does show the ownership and where it starts and stops relative to the trails and so forth.
How about the question of timing?
When to put it out?
When to send it out, yeah. Sometime in December kind of seems to make sense to me, especially if it's going through Jackson ski touring, just because that's probably when people will start to really be thinking about using that property to ski and thinking about winter and all that. That gives a little bit of a buffer between the Jackson Falls survey. Do you know if Jackson Ski Touring typically sends some sort of newsletter or update out at any given?
Quite frequently, like now they send them out to get volunteers. They've had volunteers up on Prospect Farm and stuff I know very recently.
So maybe we could just time it to converge with one of those send outs and do the same date for e-news.
So if I've got it correct, add a 9th question, which is the one that Tom brought up, relative to just where people's knowledge on where the boundaries are or not. And Jeff, I could work with you. I haven't used Google Forms before, but maybe you can help get that set up. And then then we would just put this out and I would have Ellen put it out in one of her email blasts, and then we would ask people just to respond by, if we put out in the beginning of December, to respond by, like December 21st or something. Because after about 2 weeks, you normally don't get a lot of returns after it's been put out.
Ben and then Tom.
Oh, go ahead. Okay, thank you. I guess sort of I'm trying to imagine what we'll do with the information that is generated from this survey, of like what if we're looking for a pattern of answers, or like I'm just like question 5. What does that tell us if people know that, especially if we're splitting up with ski? Well, what does it tell us if someone were to answer that? Or in question 6, that ranking of things that people think should be permitted. That one throws me the most, is if you're asking people what they think should be permitted, and you just get a lot of, well, we only want one thing, which is skiing and hiking, and there's not a large response on any of those. How do we weight that answer? Or how would we look at that? Because all of those things are allowed, and they're not, none of those are disallowed.
That's not true. The ATV is not allowed. Snowmobiling is kind of funky because the town in 72 voted for snowmobiling, but only if they developed their own trail system that was separate from the ski trails, etc. Then the town voted not to allow snowmobiling. And then a number of years back, by petition, there was a close vote. They voted to allow snowmobiling up there, but there's never been any development relative to a parking spot or a trail system for snowmobiling up there.
Right. So that's just
it's
sort of
very
asking if there's things that are permitted, that are things that are not currently permitted. If someone says, well, I think it should be permitted, what is that setting us up to asking, well, if there's a huge response to something not currently permitted, or it just seems, I don't know how to interpret the answers we would get from that section.
Well, I was trying not to be, but I mean, we can discuss and to determine whether we want to do this or not. Something like ATVs, I know that there's some people have thought that that should be permitted up there. I know in the forest management plan, et cetera, I think they would discourage it just because of the wet soils and the types of roads that are up there. But obviously, if we ended up with a huge response that ATV should be permitted, we may not like it personally, but I think we would have to address it as something that people do want to do.
Okay, I guess if we're binding ourselves to whatever responses we get to that,
I don't know. I'm not looking at here. It's binding. It's really, if I understood the purpose of this was to get it out and see what people think, not what we think.
I think the other thing,
right.
Go ahead, Ben.
I guess it's just, trying to determine who the user groups are. And if there's a user group that currently doesn't operate there, it just seems confusing to ask. It just seems like there's a little bit of what do you think should be permitted? And if people don't like any of those other things on there and they say, well, we don't want that, how do you interpret that they only like doing one thing versus people who are like, well, I would like to do all of those things, or I think all of those things should be allowed. How do you weight those two answers if you get two yeses, but they indicate two slightly different things? Or if this is getting in the weeds, we can just move on.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're asking the right question. Anytime you ask a question, you ought to know how you're going to process it in the end, as opposed to just asking it and trying to figure out in the end. The way that I tried to structure this, but if people see a better way to do it, is the reasons why I put check all that apply, because somebody could cross-country ski, they could snowshoe, they could walk their dog, and we would tabulate those all as individual responses for each of those, and we would just start to see what the distribution is as to what people think should apply up there.
I guess it's the third question and the sixth question are so very similar that one seems to indicate that, well, either way.
Yeah. The third, and again, I'm just responding my thought process, which is not to defend it. The third question is really just trying to get a sense of what are people doing up there.
Right.
And the sixth question is asking, okay, people may go up there and just hike, but they would not object to hunting. So on number 6, they could put down that they still think that hunting's appropriate, even though what they do up there is hike and not hunt.
Right. And how do you tease that out if they, okay, this is in the weeds in my head. So
I guess I thought when I looked at it that I was thinking that we were checking it with people and that it wouldn't dictate any formal stance, because that would be done at a town meeting or by, a town vote, but that this would help see if our management plan matches the usage. I guess that's how I saw it in my eyes, was like, okay, we've been managing the property for these particular uses. Is that what we should be doing? Like, is that what people are actually using it for? So I guess I had been thinking of it as more of an informal, like, okay, here's the management plan. Here's how we've traditionally managed the land. Is that what the user groups want? And if we say, oh, we've been mostly managing it for cross-country skiing, and it comes back and no one cross-country skis up there. Obviously, this is, making this up, but, oh, actually the highest user group is something else, then that would make me think, okay, how might that affect the amount of time and money we're putting into that specific form of recreation and management? And then I guess I saw the third and sixth questions as different, kind of what Ken said, and that one is saying this is what I do the most, but I'm okay with being up here and having these other things happen. And I think the idea of how you weight those responses is important. And I guess I had been thinking of it less as this is direct action and more of like, okay, this is informally letting us know we're following on the right path. And should we want to pursue something at a town meeting or through the management plan, this might be a step in that direction versus like, here's the numbers, we should do this. That's how I interpret it.
I think the other thing that is important to note is that in combination with whatever feedback we get here and whatever ideas we personally have as the commission, we also have to adhere to the intent of the will to the extent that's possible, obviously. So for instance, if we got this big response to the ATV question, we would still have to go back and look and see, does that line up and interpret, how that would line up with the intent of the will, the abutting properties, that kind of stuff. And so I don't think it necessarily dictates where we go with the management plan, but it does, I guess it would give us a good idea of if we draft the management plan in a certain way, how much support that is going to eventually get at the town meeting. I know Tom had a question or a comment a little while ago.
Yeah, I have a couple running through my head that I'll try to keep separate. One, again, between questions 3 and 6, 3 I thought was a good question of what do you do currently, and 6 is more of the what would you like to do, which could be a hard question to ask because some of these things are definitively not allowed currently, and I don't know if we should break it up into the things that would require just change, basically different town votes. Like, for example, having camping up there, as Ken pointed out, like you can't camp currently, mostly, but that is one of the points that the police department wanted addressed, a year ago, which kind of got us in this conversation. So a lot of this stuff I think we do need to sort out, but I think this question 6 maybe is getting at a couple different bigger questions behind it. But it would be good to see what people want. And I don't know, it's not a great answer, but I think 6 might be attempting to do a couple things. And kind of to step back a little bit too, I wonder if we want any questions on this. These are all focused on recreation, but there are other aspects of a general management plan. Like, I guess timber management, for example, follow just supporting recreation? Like, do we want certain types of hunting habitat or all that? Or do we want any bigger level questions on how we fund it, how it runs in general, to kind of zoom back out from recreation, since this is a general plan, I don't know if those bigger questions are, if people really care about how we go about managing it or how we fund it.
I had a similar point, I guess, and I agree with question number 3 and the difference with number 6. What you actually do when you go up there and what you're okay with having go on at Prospect. But I guess what I wrote down was for question 6, when we looked at it more so about what are you okay with being permitted up there, it kind of made me wonder if, as much as this isn't a recreational activity, sustainable forestry, because that is in the Baker deed, and it is something that can take place there, and just seem like if we're broadening that question into what are you okay with taking place at Prospect Farm, I just started to wonder, well, maybe that should be part of it, or just actual management process of, could be for birding or hunting or whatever that is.
So Brian, actually that is a good point. And right now we've got 8 questions. I would strongly urge you not go over 10. But if we do have the suggestion that Tom had a few seconds ago, and then we added I think it was Tom, and then we added a second question that just said that, a sustainable forestry plan has been put together, to try to take into consideration wildlife management and other stuff, Are you okay with, do you support sustainable forestry on this property? A yes or no kind of question.
Yeah, agreed.
And I don't want to wordsmith it right now, but
No, I think that's good. I think it's important, and I think as a whole, I think maybe some people that are less recreation minded would feel more, a part of this conversation.
I mean, it's kind of an interesting history, actually. In the town, at least the way that I understand it after I read through the whole record, is the town inherits this in 1955. Contrary to the sustainable forestry, they clear cut it.
Clear cuts it.
Yeah, but that is also became what was the source of the funding for the Baker Fund that's used now to, clear the fields and so forth. So there was a bad, but there was some good that came out of the bad.
Yep.
But a lot of the forestry management plan is still designed to try to recover from that clear cut.
It could maybe just be a general question about what do you see as or how would you rank the management priorities for Prospect Farm? A, recreation, B, timber management, C, habitat. Whatever.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous of teeing it up that way because the will is the legal document. And I think we want to be careful of not trying to get people to think that, because popular opinion says you can go against the will, you can go against the will, because legally, I don't think that that's possible.
Yeah, I agree.
Makes sense.
I think you're just starting to create a problem that you don't want to, which is giving people a false choice. The will and the town's acceptance is all based on the term recreation.
Yeah. Ken, for the idea of a question about whether you stay on town land or not, I wonder if you could just put it after question 2. So you ask people, do you use Prospect Farm, and its abutting lands to recreate? And then the next question would be, do you stay on town land? Do you go off town land, or do you not, or C, do you not know? Kind of tie those 2 things together.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good sequence. So that gives us, if we put that's
That would be 10, right?
That's 10 right there. So I think if we start to add more, then we ought to ask ourselves which ones we're deleting. Not that 10 is sacred, but there are sort of rules of, too many questions and people just stop.
Well, I think question 7 would be a candidate if one had to go. That I don't think you're going to get anyone who said it's declined, and I don't know how you measure between steady and where's considerable at.
Yeah, I mean,
that could get.
Yeah, and I agree. This is probably, if we're going to cast one, this is probably it. I only put this in because it's exactly what the whole Jackson Falls thing is all about right now. And so it would be good to get a sense of, and this is pretty standard. I mean, I've done some of these kinds of surveys before. I've been involved with them on Baxter State Park and Elaho and part of Acadia National Park, et cetera, is just, where are people's perception of use? Is it such that they really believe that use is really increasing dramatically? Because if that's what they perceive and that's what we think we're seeing, that gives you some logic about how to manage it. Whereas if most people think use has just been steady and hasn't changed, or it's declining, then the need for a general management plan is probably less. But right now, unless we add one, but I would agree with you, Ben, that that's probably the first candidate to go if we start adding some additional ones outside.
We're
of
at 10 right now with the additions that we've made.
Actually 8, we're at 11 right now. Because Tom has suggested making it sort of a two-part question. Question 1 was, do you just recreate within the Prospect Farm boundaries? And then the follow-up question there was, do you know that you've actually, if you're going outside the town boundaries, do you know that you're going outside them?
I think you could probably have those answers within one question.
Yeah. Let me
Work the
wordsmith
words.
to that. Again, I don't think we want to spend the night wordsmithing it, right?
Yeah, and I think if we end up at 11 questions, it's not the end of the world.
I don't think so.
The difference between 10 and 11 is going to kill people, but
Right.
yeah, I agree with the general president of sticking around that number. So
Agreed.
all right, any other thoughts on that for tonight?
Yes, I'd like to say, see if Ken would copy the selectman's office. I don't get any of this. I haven't seen any of the product yet. So if you send it to the selectman's office, they'll get it to me. I get, 6, 8 emails a day from the office that on other business. So if you would just copy them, and I will get that. And the other thing is, I talked to our town forester. He wants to go up there and do the marking of the boundaries. He's not sure when he'll get up there. Now, he would like to go up with an ATV to bring his equipment up there and his paint and cans. So I would think that that would be all right. I told him it was. You can't go up there and mow without a tractor, so I would let him go up there with an ATV. And if he doesn't get it this fall, he'll do it in the spring. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll catch up with you on that, but I've been sending it
On
out,
what?
Dick, on these emails, because I've been sending it to the email list that Jeff has, and I just assumed that you were getting them because I thought it went to your address. But you're suggesting that I use a different one?
Well, I don't know. I haven't gotten anything, so it just as easy. Send it to the town. It's good for them to have a copy of whatever's going on. And like I said, they get me almost everything.
So you want me to
comes
send
in.
it to the Julies then?
Yep.
Yep, okay. So what I will do is refine the questionnaire based on the input from this evening, and then work with Jeff to set it up, to send it out. And if we can do it on the Google Forms without having to pay anything, then we would try to send this out in the early part of December, the first week in December, something like that. And do people want to, I would send everybody what the revised is. Do people want to see the revised and edit it again? If we do that, then we wouldn't be looking at it again until our meeting in December. Or you want me to just proceed ahead, working with Jeff to get it out, get it ready to get out for the first week in December?
And if you send it out and we read it, do we have to have a meeting, or can we just look at it?
What I'll do is make the suggested changes here to the questionnaire, send it out in the next week or so, and ask people if they've got any other suggested edits or changes, get it back to me by the second or third week in November. And then I can work with Jeff from that point on.
That works for me.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
One other thing on Prospect Farm, And I was asked to ask this permission. The Jackson Ski Touring Foundation is been up there on the Forest Service part, resetting a culvert that got blown out. If they have time, they would try to, and this was in Tim Nolan's report, since they would have a small tractor with a backhoe, they could try to go up and open up those water bars again on both the Orchard and the Wildcat Valley Trail. If they have time, do you want to give them permission to do that? Which was one of the recommendations in Tim Nolan's report.
Could
And
you
what would they be doing?
Yeah, you blocked out there just for a sec.
The water bars on the roads, there's water bars
Okay.
and they filled in and they need to be redug back out. And Jackson Ski Touring Foundation will be up there. I don't know if the tractor is still up there or not, but if their tractor is still up there, because they did need to bring it up to reset a water bar that had blown out on the Forest Service Quail Trail, they could take the tractor up and redig out the water bars on the Orchard Trail, as well as when you proceed up the Wildcat Valley Trail toward the Hall's Ledge area. But they didn't want to get into doing that without permission from the committee.
Sounds logical to me.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Did we take a vote to approve that, or is that not necessary? Guess we may as well, just for the sake of it. I'll make a motion to allow Jackson Ski Touring to clean out the water bars at Prospect Farm.
I'll second it.
Seconded.
I can't guarantee it if the tractor's out of there already, but we'll try to see if it's up.
Voted.
There, they go ahead and do it.
All right, all in favor, Ken,
Aye.
Tom,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Ben,
Aye.
and I'm a yes. All right, great. All right, I don't have anything on Wildcat River at the moment. Try to keep coming back to that when we have more time. I also don't have anything on Gray's Inn. Does anybody have anything for Gray's Inn?
Just that the beavers. Oh, Gray's Inn. I'm sorry. Gray's talking Gray's Field, but the beavers did
I know all about it.
flood out the field.
I think they've already started to work on breaching that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They came in and dug it out, and they're back at it.
That was pretty significant flooding.
Yeah, yeah. It was impressive.
Is that by the library or is that another Gray's Field?
No, this is Gray's Field. It's actually on Forest Service land. It's flooding out a whole chunk of Jackson ski touring trails.
Oh, on the fields down there. Okay.
Yeah, on the Ellis.
Yep.
Over towards.
It's actually on the
Hall
bank
Trail.
that heads up to South Hall.
Yeah.
When I was up there, that was 6 inches deep and flowing pretty heavily down the
Yeah.
trail.
All right. Anyone with monitoring updates for conservation easements? Does anyone have?
I met with the Tilneys last Saturday. We're all set there.
Great.
Go ahead, Ben.
They have another parcel that they are kind of in the process of thinking about entering into an easement. But they were wary of working with a third party and were wondering what the town's position was of having ownership of the property or properties in general for conservation easements. I didn't know how to respond to that, so.
If it's in current use, the difference in tax would be negligible. And number two is just based on the earlier conversation. If they put it in a conservation easement, that could be potentially used as leverage in the Dundee project.
Okay, well, they are keen they have another, I can't remember exactly, another 43-acre parcel that kind of fits that definition of a higher property tax value or higher appraised value.
Do you think it would be 75% forested?
I could probably follow up with her about exactly where that is, but I think it's further.
Street, isn't it?
Yeah, if it's the house across the street after the slope, then that's heavily wooded.
I think that's the criteria for the Forest Legacy program.
Well, I think what
Well,
Will said here, though, also would be that the easement would have to go to Upper Saco Valley Land Trust for it to work. We should follow up with Will, but
right. Well, I guess her concern was that she felt that if it was going to the town should be holding it, that she felt more comfortable with the town having it because she wanted the town to be able to use it rather than a third party.
I think whatever makes it comfortable to get into easement, but whichever works out. 'Cause if they're leery of the third party, I guess we could try education. It was better that way.
I think it was also just the fees to get it into that process seemed rather high.
That's similar to the Hayes Farm Willett conversation.
well, yeah, I mean, normally when a land trust picks up properties today, and rightly so, they do ask for an endowment. So that because they have the legal responsibility to continue to monitor the land from that point on. If it was donated as an easement to the town, maybe what she's looking for is by doing that, then they would not have to come up with the money to pay for the endowment.
Right. I believe that's where she was working towards.
I don't think the town really is looking to take on any other easements. As you just said, I think they lose some of the, even if it's a current use value, they lose the tax value if they hold the easement. So I think they're looking to have the third party hold it. And I think if it works out, I think Upper Saco would be a great one for them to deal with.
Okay.
Yeah, you might mention to them that it could be used as, if it went to Upper Saco, it could be used as leverage. And, you could have a conversation with Upper Saco. I understand why the land trust have to do this, because they've got to think in terms of their, ability to just stay alive fiscally out into the future. Because if you pick up all these responsibilities with no money to carry them out, that's not a good business plan in the long run. But, Will might even have some ways of thinking about coming up with the endowment if that's the roadblock with those folks.
Okay. I'll pass that along.
But
Tom, did you have something you wanted to say?
It could be used as leverage if it was, if the conservation easement was held by Upper Saco.
I was just wondering about the taxes. When the town holds the conservation easement and the owner still owns the land, are they still paying basically the current use tax on the land? Is that how it works? Okay. So as long as it's in current use, if they donate the conservation easement, the tax should stay the same coming to the town?
I think it's a little more complicated than that, because I believe that current use is assessed relative to what either the timber value or the agricultural value is. And there's a whole formula that the state has to make that determination. Whereas when you put in conservation easement, what you're doing is just extinguishing the development rights. So the formulas, I think, are slightly different. They probably, in the end, come close to each other, but they're not one and the same.
I guess my one thought on the Tilneys in particular is, if I understand the history right, they, with everyone else that donated conservation easements to the town around the Wildcat River, that played a big part in showing that the town basically cared about the Wildcat River in order to get the designation for wild and scenic.
That is correct. It's the same kind of leverage that Will is looking for right now.
Yeah, I guess it's a long-winded way of saying, like, I agree that in general, conservation easements are better held by third parties now for lots of reasons. Tax is one of them, but if this is, I guess, a thank you for something they did 30 years ago, I don't know if it could be a special case at the, you know, at the end kind of thing, or if we even want to get into that kind of nuance.
Yeah.
Because their current conservation easement is with a society, isn't it?
Yeah. That's why we monitor it.
No, it's the town owns the conservation easement. So this
Okay.
is the, whatever the Pam always corrects me, but the fancy
Right.
phrase, the third party, that if the town defaults, then SPNF gets it.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So it sounds like an ongoing conversation
Okay.
to be, I don't know, parsed out further. Maybe through some of our conversations with William, we can see if he has any good ideas. Yeah, I don't know that I have a good way to wrap up the conversation for tonight.
Okay. Well, I can also follow up with him because I don't know a lot about this particular area, so I'd like to read up on it or just get a little better understanding of how the entire process works.
And plus, the Tonys might be interested in thinking that a conservation easement from them to Upper Saco Valley might be beneficial in terms of getting the Dundee Forest.
Right. I'll definitely pass that along to her because
It may be
seems
worth checking with William first to just make sure that there's not anything that would, for whatever reason, preclude that from being the case before that's offered as a potential option for them.
Okay. Well, I'll check with him first, and just so that'll help me get an understanding of how the process works too. So that's good.
Good job, Ben.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Any other monitoring updates?
I spoke with Alex Burgess, and we roughly set plans to meet last week, but I don't know if it was the weather or a couple things came up. So he's going to try to come up and walk a part of the property, at least part of it. He was excited to kind of be, get to be included.
Great.
Yeah, I still have to do mine. I have to get in touch with Peppers, but
All right. Well, sounds like everyone has it on their radar anyway, so that's good. I don't have anything for wetlands. Didn't receive anything. Don't know of anything. And the only other thing that I wanted to mention as part of new business, unless anyone else has anything, is that I got an email noting that we have to complete the annual report by January. So I'm happy to do that. But one thing that they mentioned is that they would like an updated photo of all of us. I suppose we could do it through Zoom, but maybe at some point we can figure out a way to get together to do a 6 foot apart photo.
Sweet.
We could also suggest we'll do it next year.
Not a bad idea. Yeah.
Do you want everybody just to send you a photo and just put them together in one photo?
Different size heads.
I'll try to think of something creative. We'll see. Not the most urgent item, but anything else for new business? All right.
Nope.
Did you say oh or no? No.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it. Unless there's any public comment.
No.
Hearing none, I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a second? Mike seconds it. And all those in favor, Ken,
Aye.
Tom,
yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Ben,
Aye.
And I'm a yes. Thanks, everyone. That was a long meeting.
Thanks, Jeff.
Have a good
Thank you,
night.
Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.